Most people imagine Thor as unstoppable, the god of thunder, the god of lightning, the breaker of giants, the one being in the Norse world who never looks weak, never looks foolish, and never loses control. But there's one story, one of the most famous and most brilliant in all of Norse literature, where Thor wakes up and finds himself stripped of the very thing that makes him feared across the 9 worlds. His hammer is gone. Mjölnir, sacred weapon that crushes mountains, hallows oaths, protects the gods and keeps the giants at bay, has vanished. And what follows is one of the strangest stories in Norse myth. It is part comedy, it is part crisis, part humiliation and part revenge, because to get his hammer back, Thor must do something no one would ever expect of him. He must disguise himself as a bride. This is a story of how Thor lost his hammer, Mjölnir, and how he got it back. The story survives an old Norse poem called Thrym, usually translated as the Lay of Thrym. It is one of the most greatest mythological poems of the poetic Edda, and although it is often funny, it is not a trivial tale. Under the humour is a real sense of danger, because if Mjölnir is missing, then Asgard itself is exposed. The story begins with Thor waking and reaching for his hammer, but when his hand goes to where it should be, he feels nothing. For no hammer is there, no familiar weight, no weapon, no hammer. In the poem, the reaction is immediate and violent. Thor's beard trembles, his hair shakes. The strongest of the gods is suddenly in a rage. Where's my hammer? Because he knows at once that this is no small matter. This is not a misplaced object. This is a catastrophe. A stolen hammer is not like a lost glove or a forgotten tool. This is the main defensive weapon of the gods. It is the thing that has repeatedly smashed giant skulls and protected the divine world from chaos. Without it, the balance between gods and giants begins to wobble. So Thor turns to the one figure in Norse myth who is always involved when something has gone wrong. Loki. Thor tells Loki that the hammer is gone, and the implication is obvious. If the giants have taken it, then they have struck at the very heart of the divine power. Loki understands the seriousness of it. Immediately, he does indeed. There is no joking at the start. There is urgency. There is danger. Something must be done, and done quickly. To investigate, Loki borrows the feather cloak of Freya. This is the magical bird skin, often described as a falcon or a hawk cloak, which allows its wearer to fly between the worlds. That detail matters because in Norse myth, movement between the realms is not casual. To pass from the world of the gods to the world of the giants is to cross a boundary between order and threat, between civilization and a hostile force. Wearing Freya's feather cloak, Loki flies out of Asgard and travels to Jotunheim, the land of the giants. There he finds the giant king, Thrym. Now in the poem, Thrym is sitting on a mound. He is not hiding. He is not nervous. He is braiding golden leashes for his dogs and trimming the manes of his horses. That image is important. It shows confidence. It shows leisure. It shows that he believes he is in control. He is behaving like someone who knows he has struck a devastating blow and now has the advantage. When Loki asked him directly whether he has stolen Mjölnir, Thrym admits it. I have, he says. There is no denial, no attempt to conceal it. He says he has hidden the hammer deep beneath the earth, so deep that no one will retrieve it by force. And then he states his price. He will only return the hammer if Freya is given to him as his bride. That demand tells us several things at once. First, it shows that this is not a mere theft. It is political. It is symbolic. The giant wants not just a weapon, but a union between the giants and the goddesses, a force joining of the world on a giant's terms. Second, it shows arrogance. Thrym thinks the gods are desperate enough to bargain. And third, it shows how often women in myth become focal points of power, alliance, honour and coercion. Loki returns at once to Asgard and reports what he has learned. The hammer is in the giant's hands. The demand is Freya, so the gods go to Freya and tell her what Thrym wants. Her reaction is one of the best moments in the story. She is furious. In the poem, her anger is so great that the halls shake. Her famed necklace, blizzing garment, trembles or bursts loose as she flares with rage. This is not the response of a passive figure. This is not a silent goddess waiting to be exchanged. She refuses absolutely. The meaning is clear. No, she will not be handed over to the giant. No, she will not be turned into a solution to a crisis created by male power and giant's aggression. The gods are left with a problem. The obvious answer has failed. The giant has the hammer. Freya refuses rightly to be used as payment, and the gods, for all their strength and all their wisdom, do not immediately know what to do. So they gather a council. This assembly of the gods is a crucial moment in many myths. Problems are solved by strength. Here, strength alone is not enough. The gods need cunning, theatre, deception, and it is Heimdall, often imagined as the watchman of the gods, who proposes the wildest and most memorable solution in the entire poem. Let Thor dress as the bride. It is a ridiculous idea, and that is precisely why it works so well in the story. The mightiest, most masculine, most physical, intimidating of the gods is asked not to charge into battle, but to put on a bridal gown, cover his face with a veil, and ride to the land of the giants, pretending to be Freya. The poem plays this for comedy, but it's clever comedy. It creates cognitive dissonance. It takes the figure least suited to disguise and puts him into the most humiliating disguise imaginable. Thor hates the idea. No, he says. He protests. His objections is understandable. If he goes dressed as a woman, the gods may call him unmanly, ridiculous, shameful. In honour, appearance and reputation matter. Yet the deep point is that Thor must temporarily sacrifice pride in order to recover the instrument of his power. He must endure humiliation before he can reclaim dominance. The gods insist. There is no better plan, so they prepare Thor for the role. They dress him in a bridal linen. They place a veil over his face. They hang keys at his side, because in many historical literary traditions, keys symbolise a woman's role in household authority and domestic stewardship. They adorn him with jewellery, and around his neck they place Bishingamen, Freya's famous necklace. Or at least, in the poem, he is equipped with the ornaments associated with noble pride and associated with Freya. Every detail intensifies the absurdity. This is still Thor, still huge, still dangerous, still simmering with fury, but now wrapped in the outer form of a bride. Loki then volunteers, or is assigned, depending on how one reads the tone, to accompany him disguised as a handmaid. That makes sense. If anyone can talk them through danger, improvise under pressure, and answer awkward questions, it is Loki. So the pair set out together toward Jotunheim. One is the god of thunder, disguised as a woman, the other a trickster, disguised as her attendant. It is one of the most strangest journeys in all of Norse myths. When they arrive in Giant Land, Thrym is delighted. He believes he has won. The bride has come. The marriage can proceed, and the giants prepare for the wedding feast. This is where the story becomes even more brilliant, because the disguise is immediately put under pressure. A bride is expected to behave with restraint, with delicacy, with ceremonial calm. But Thor, he cannot dedicate. He is ravenous, he is furious, and he is sitting in the hall of his enemies, trying not to explode at the feast. He devours an entire ox. He eats 8 salmon. He consumes all the delicacies set before him, and he drinks 3 great vessels, often rendered as casks or large measures of mead. The giant stares. This is no normal bride. This is something monstrous. Something is wrong. Thrym becomes suspicious and asks why Freya, or the woman he thinks is Freya, is eating so enormously. Here, Loki saves the plan with quick speech. He explains the bride has not eaten for 8 nights because she was so eager for the wedding. It is a superb example of mythic improvisation. A behaviour that should expose the deception is reinterpreted as proof of bridal longing. The feast continues. Then Thrym leans forward and attempts to kiss the bride. He lifts the veil or peers beneath it, and what he sees shocks him. Instead of a soft bridal eyes, he sees the blazing stare of Thor. The eyes are terrifying. The poem gives us a marvellous image here. The bride's eyes flash with such intensity that Thrym recoils in alarm. Again, Loki rescues the situation. He explains that the bride has not slept for 8 nights. So eager has she been for the union. Once again, extreme and unnatural behaviour is explained away by the same absurd but effective excuse. The tension rises because the audience knows how close the disguise is to failure. Everything depends on the giants continuing to believe the performance for just a little bit longer. Then another figure appears, Thrym's sister, in some versions or translations, simply an old giant woman of the household. She asks for bridal gifts. She wants rings, treasures, or tokens. This little detail matters because it adds another obstacle, another interruption, another social expectation of the wedding scene. The whole hall is participating in the ritual, and the danger of discovery keeps on growing. Then comes the crucial moment, the turning point of the entire story. To bless the marriage, Thrym calls for the hammer. This is deeply significant. Mjölnir is not only a weapon in the Norse tradition, it is also a sacred object, connected with consecration, protection and blessing. That is why, in the poem, Thrym wants the hammer brought in and laid in the bride's lap to sanctify the wedding, even invoking the goddess Thor in some translations as a witness to oaths and troths. There is heavy irony in this. The giant who stole the hammer now calls for it in the order to bless the very deception that will destroy him. The weapon is brought forward. At last, Thor sees it, the thing he has crossed worlds to recover, the thing without which the gods are endangered, the thing that makes him who he is in war. It is placed in his lap, and in that instant the story changes from comedy back to violence. The poem says Thor laughed ha 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 in his heart when he saw the hammer. That phrase is perfect. Outwardly the bride still sits there veiled. Inwardly the god of thunder knows the game is over. His hand close around Mjölnir. The disguise has done its work. The humiliation has purchased the moment of reversal. And now the giant feast becomes a slaughter. Thor raises and kills Thrym first. That is important. The thief dies before anyone else. Then Thor strikes down the other giants in the hall. He calls Thrym's sister as well, the one who demanded bridal gifts. The wedding feast turns into a scene of divine vengeance on what has been arranged as a union between giant and goddess becomes instead a demonstration of exactly why Thor is feared. He may be made to look ridiculous for a time. He may endure mockery, costume and restraint. But once the hammer is back in his hands, the natural order, at least from the gods' point of view, is violently restored. That is the core of the story. Thor loses his hammer. The giants think they have outmaneuvered the gods. The gods cannot solve the crisis through force or violence alone, so they rely on disguise, patience, cunning and trickery. And at this decisive moment, the sacred weapon returns to its rightful owner and the chaos is smashed back into submission. The tale is funny, but it is also rich with meaning. It shows that the gods are not above embarrassment. It shows that power sometimes has to hide itself before it can strike. It shows that Loki, for all of his danger elsewhere in myth, can be indispensable. It shows that Freya will not meekly accept being traded away. And it shows that Mjölnir is more than a hammer. It is a symbol of defined legitimacy, sacred order, and the boundary between the gods and their enemies. There is also something very deeply human in the story, because Thor is not admirable here because he is invulnerable. He is admirable because he accepts humiliation for the sake of necessity. He does what he must do to recover what was lost. He endures the costume, the performance, the indignity, the tension and the near exposure because without that sacrifice there is no victory that gives the story more depth than people sometimes realise. It is not only about laughter, it is about recovering power through endurance, and that may be why this myth lasted. Not simply because it is a bizarre, but because it contains a truth. Sometimes strength alone is not enough. Sometimes even the strongest figure in the world must submit to the discomfort, the absurdity and the tragedy in order to win. So yes, Thor got his hammer back, but he did not get it back by charging blindly at the gates of Jotunheim. He got it back by deception, patience, trickery and perfectly timed violence. And this is what makes this one of the most greatest Norse myths ever told. The strongest god in the world was forced to dress as a bride. The giants laughed too soon, and when the hammer returned to his lap, the laughter ended. If you want more real Norse myths told in full detail with the original context and meaning behind them, like, subscribe and share, and tell me in the comments, would you have recognised Thor before he reached for the hammer? And what tale would you like next on this channel?